And the big story at this hour, well, India-China disengagement is likely to be complete by October end. That's what sources seem to have indicated. Remember, this is the biggest breakthrough, the biggest thaw in the Indo-China border dispute. Remember, the border situation has only gotten worse along the line of actual control since the May 2020 Galwan clashes. But this big development comes after both the sides had agreed to patrolling their respective areas. In fact, what sources have also indicated that 40 to 50% disengagement is already complete. Now remember, this of course after the Prime Minister's meeting with the Chinese Premier Xi on the sidelines of the BRICS summit. So perhaps both sides striking conciliatory note, that certainly was the approach. But let me go across to Nazir, but before that let's listen to what the Northern Commander had to say, because this is a big development in terms of the standoff coming to an end, or perhaps paving the way for some sort of consensus on the border dispute. Let's quickly listen into what they had to say.
To put it very briefly, India and China have been involved in talks both at the diplomatic and military levels to resolve the differences in balance areas along the line of actual control. And pursuant to the talks, broad consensus has been achieved to restore the ground situation based on principles of equal and mutual security. The consensus achieved includes patrolling and grazing through traditional areas.
Nazir Masoodi is now live with us. So Nazir, this is a big development, perhaps the biggest breakthrough in the Indo-China border standoff. What more details do you have? How do you see this panning out? Because the sense is that 40 to 50% disengagement has already been completed, and this is likely to reach some sort of consensus by October end.
Exactly, and it is an extraordinary breakthrough when both the sides have arrived at a consensus, actually restoring the pre-April 2020 situation. Post-Galwan incident, things have completely changed. There was escalation on the line of actual control. First challenge was for the both sides of the de-escalation, and now they have finally reached the point where disengagement has been ensured. And by month, there will be Depsang and Demchok, two important friction points where there will be complete disengagement by 28th, 29th of this month. So next week, we'll see complete disengagement. And then the troops from the both sides, Chinese and the Indian army, they will be patrolling at their respective points, but they were patrolling before April 2020. That is very important. That means nobody is losing anything. So status quo is being restored what it was in 2020. And importantly, the temporary structures or the infrastructure that was created after the escalation, after the standoff, during the standoff, that will be removed. Whether these are barracks, these are tents, these other infrastructure, because both sides have put up a lot of infrastructure to deal with the situation, that is being removed. And according to army source, there's not any quid pro quo, which means there's not any bargain. You go behind this side, this place, we are going to behind this place. That's not happening. According to army sources, it is based on the mutual respect to the positions of both the sides, and both the sides have arrived at a consensus. And finally, this was not easy. It took actually all these years of diplomacy, very apt diplomacy, and also the military diplomacy. We see regularly Indian army officers and the Chinese officers were working. They held series of meetings, and finally, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Xi met at SCO summit, it was clear that both the sides have arrived at a consensus. And now what we know, next week, this disengagement will be complete at two important friction points, which is Depsang and Demchok in eastern Ladakh.
As you said, Nazir, this is an extraordinary development. I think that was very well put. And how do you see this playing out on the ground? Because it's not going to be easy. We have seen since May 2020, post the Galwan clashes, things have only gotten worse. In terms of Chinese sort of moving further into the territory, and also the border situation also getting only worse in the past 2 to 3 years. How will this disengagement pan out? Because patrolling is also likely to begin, but by October 30th perhaps, how are both sides going to achieve this sort of complete disengagement?
Well, that is as we already decided, and it has been agreed upon. Both the sides will disengage, troops will pull back, and they will be patrolling where they were patrolling pre-April 2020. But larger point is that the two-front confrontation which Indian Army had, whether it was the northern side or it was the line of actual control or the line of control with Pakistan or China, it was not clearly in India's interest. And we have, as I said, for the last 4 years, there was hard diplomacy. There was from military side as well as the diplomatic side. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar also held a series of meetings, and there was back channel negotiations. And finally, as I said, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi meeting at SCO. This is as a very, very extraordinary. Normally, when you have such type of protracted confrontation in a border area, it's not easy to arrive at a consensus, and both sides see it as a win-win situation and go back where they were in 2020, so before the Galwan clashes. So that way, it is a military victory and it is a diplomatic victory. And because after the Galwan incident, India had to move large number of troops to eastern Ladakh and also massive resource in a most inhospitable area, in barren area where temperature goes below -40 degree, -25 degree. In January, I was here in Neoma. That time it was -25 degrees. So one can't imagine, in fact, operating in those areas when you have to put troops and an eyeball-to-eyeball situation, and avoiding that situation is a great victory, diplomatic victory or a military victory for the both sides. And more importantly, that one engagement, the confrontation at the line of control, it was clearly, as External Affairs Minister was repeatedly say, they don't want any confrontation with China. They want a resolution of this problem amicably, and that has been finally achieved.